Okay, good evening. Good evening, lovely people. I think I've got myself together tonight, I should say. Um, I have got the chat sorted, I think, so I can actually see what's going on. Um, so yeah, I'm going to start with an apology for the last episode where I wasn't very engaging with the chat because it wasn't showing up on my screen. And then when I looked back at it, I realized there was like so much chat going on. So I didn't really respond to it or post anything on the stage, as they call it in StreamYard language. So I will definitely try tonight and be more interactive with what is going on. Yeah, I'm having like issues with my reception tonight as well, which is great. So let me refresh. It's not even showing me what's going on. But anyway, I wanted to start tonight a little bit different. So we're on part 6 of this book, this amazing book. Put it on that side. Nobody's Girl, Virginia Giuffre. We're kind of hedging towards the end of the book. So I wanted to like just go over some of the information that she kind of revealed in the last chapter, because I felt like it was like we got a lot there. We got a lot of information, and yeah, I just feel like it doesn't get enough focus on what was being said. So, for example, what we heard was good evening, but why, by the way? Very good to see you. Spoiler alert, Prince Andrew is guilty. Yeah, he's not Prince Andrew anymore. Just in case you're not from the UK, I don't know if that news has spread far and wide, but yeah, he's had his title taken away. There's still some debate going on about where he lives, because in case you don't know it, yeah, like the royal family in this country, they're like the biggest scroungers in the UK. They do nothing, like at least with the queen, yeah, like she did actually used to go out, she used to do visits, she used to dress up in her little matching outfit, and she was like an ambassador, do you know what I mean? Like he made an effort, like everyone had a soft spot for the queen. But this lot that we're left with, they do nothing. I mean, Charles occasionally makes an appearance when he doesn't get eggs thrown at him. But they also do like backdoor cash deals. Like this is how they make money, yeah. These people that Epstein is associating with, and this is why I think him and Andrew were friends. Um, they sort out business deals. Now, you're taught to believe that criminals do business deals, like dealers, like people that don't pay tax and all of that kind of stuff, yeah, and they're like a certain class of person. But if you're in this class of person, they just do exactly that, but because of who they are, their status, they get away with it. So what I'm trying to say is the royal family use their status to get bribes, and then they get introduced, they get a pass to get away with setting up certain businesses and not paying taxes and all this other stuff. And this is not me just speculating and waffling. This is it has all been documented, only you don't hear about it, because when it does come up in the news, it gets really very little attention because of the techniques that we're hearing about with crisis PR and that kind of thing. So you'll only ever hear like about the scandalous side, and you'll only ever hear normally about the, the female members, because they're normally the ones that the attention is on. But yeah, I'm waffling a little bit. So yeah, we're gonna get on to him anyway. But one of the so I posted a link to the flight logs, and we did actually hear from Virginia that the first time she was trafficked, it was to a billionaire and his pregnant wife. So I very quickly found out the name of that guy was a guy called Glenn Dubin, and his wife is called Ava Dubin, yeah. And there's like, I don't know, some kind of speculation about Epstein's relationship to one of their daughters, but clearly this family traveled on his private jet like so much, like their name is on it so much. The whole, it's not just them, their kids, their nanny, always traveling with him for years, long after he was known to be, you know, a pedophile. So I looked him up, and it said that Glenn Dubin became a billionaire by investing in the strongest macro tailwinds. Now, I have no idea what that means. I'm sure it's like a business technical term. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. This is what they do. They don't really tell you what they do. They give you a fancy name for it, like investing in the strongest macro tailwinds. Today, he's bullish on energy, fintech, and artificial intelligence. Well, these are all the worst things we have, not just for our environment, but for our mental health. And yet, these are the things that he has become a billionaire from investments in. So yeah, I won't go too much into his other stuff. Oh, he was pals with the CEO of JP Morgan and JP Morgan Asset Management by Jeffrey Epstein. So you can imagine what is going on here. Yeah, these guys, they have assets, they make money out of investments, and yet their personal habits are criminal. So they're like a little boys club, the billionaires boy club of seedy, sleazy. And then what they do is, so his wife, I think she used to be a model, but she's known for having a foundation, yeah. So then they become like cool. They become known as philanthropists. So that's what Ghislaine did as well. She started an ocean project, so everyone's like, oh, she's a philanthropist. And this is just all a cover for what they're really up to. But yeah, so that's a quick little insight into him. But then another name that came up, and we were talking in the last chapter, or Virginia was writing in the last chapter, about how she was contacted by a journalist from the Daily Mail. And that was what made her decide to go public with her story. And I even made a comment about it. I was like, yeah, it's funny that the Daily Mail tracked her down, a victim, to Australia. Yeah. None of the perpetrators involved in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes did they bother to investigate or track down. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I made another joke. Oh no, wait. So yeah, what she said was that they came to Australia, and she still hadn't decided whether she was going to like say it was okay for them to publish the story, but she still did the interview anyway. And they had a photographer, and they took like a lot of pictures of the famous snap of her with Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah, so she didn't give them a copy of it, they took their own copy of it. So then what she said was, when the story was published, they mentioned some names, but they didn't say anything had happened with him, which made me feel, when I thought about it afterwards, you see how the British press operates? They have put all the focus on her. Like, after that story came out, she couldn't leave her house. She had to move because she was getting so ambushed with people wanting to speak to her. And yet the Daily Mail got everything they wanted to out of her. I mean, yeah, she did get paid. She said she got a fee, which I'm glad she got a fee. But they never set out right that they never implicated Andrew in the story. They just said that, you know, she had a photo with him. And they left it at that. And they said, well, we can't print that, you know, what really happened with you and him, because we don't want to get sued. So I just thought it was very insightful into how the media operates, because if they really cared about any of this stuff, they wouldn't operate like that. Do you know what I mean? What they're doing is they're getting ahead of the story and presenting it so that for years there were questions. Oh, did he or didn't he? You know? Then even when he paid her millions, he settled with her for millions of dollars, there was still questions. Well, he's not really guilty if you know, he just wanted it to go away. And this is how I feel like not a pattern has been set, because I'm sure it was already set, but I just feel like it perfectly illustrates how the media and the powerful people work together, and the poor person at the end of it, at the scapegoat, is the victim. And then what was interesting was she mentioned that the journalist's name was a woman called Sharon Churcher, yeah? So I looked up Sharon Churcher and I made a joke about how Sharon Churcher was the one that put the idea to her that she should write a book. And I was like, I bet she did. I bet she was like, oh, I know a publisher I can introduce you to, thinking, you know, she's going to get something out of that. So come to find out, there's another guy that was Epstein's lawyer called Alan Dershowitz. So now I'm already pretty familiar with him because he's just all over the place. He was one of O.J. Simpson's lawyers, and he often appears on Piers Morgan's channel. And also there's another channel, I forget the name of it, but he's a really good channel. He does really good documentaries. He's a young guy, but he did like a spoof, well, not a spoof, like he kind of tricked him into saying he was doing an interview about like some Jewish baby foundation in Israel or something like that. And so he agreed to do it because he's so thirsty for interviews. The guy kind of twisted his background a little bit and said that he was a university student, where he was a university student, but he is not anymore. He's left that college. But anyway, that's what he fell for it. He thought he was like a young, impressionable student, that he could come on and give his usual propaganda spiel to. And then he started asking him about Virginia. Anyway, what was interesting is Sharon Churcher, the journalist, yeah, he said, oh, I can hook you up with a publisher. Suggested, according to Alan Dershowitz, the name Alan Dershowitz was one of someone who assaulted her or she was trafficked to. Now, she then claimed he was a perpetrator. I think, if I remember correctly, his name might have been mentioned in the article. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, Alan Dershowitz took that bit of information and then sued her for defamation, and said that it was down to Sharon Churcher, that she'd brought his name into it, and he'd never met her in his life, which is a complete lie. I mean, he's obviously met her. Um, I like that name, Alan effing Dershowitz. Yeah, Alan. All I'm trying to say is I'm not the best at like explaining all of these things. This is why I make pre-recorded videos, because I'm like not the best. I don't think of myself as like a YouTube presenter. I just I'm not. But I know what I'm trying to say, and yeah, I just think it's very interesting because, you know, Alan Dershowitz has been around a long time. He's very familiar and very well heeled in dealing with the media by this point. Do you know what I mean? So the whole thing is just so shady of how they got that story out of her. And like, it was almost like she was the chosen victim, but to go public, if you know what I mean. And also, the other thing I wanted to say about Alan Dershowitz, yeah, is he has a very strong agenda towards discrediting the Me Too movement, and he's made that really clear. In fact, so when I looked up his name, I came across just one paper, the New York Post, which I know is like a tabloid in the US, but all the headlines I found were unbelievable. I mean, obviously he represented Donald Trump. He obviously was Epstein's lawyer. But he, like I said, he accused this woman, Sharon Churcher, of making up that Virginia Giuffre was trafficked to him. So I just thought, you know, I just feel like there's a lot we don't get told in this story, is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, that case ended with a settlement, undisclosed, and she made an admission that she might have made a mistake, but I don't see how she could have got as far with that if there wasn't something to it. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, that's Alan Dershowitz. I forget what else I was gonna say about. Oh, by the way, as well, yeah, with this like anti-Me Too stance that he takes, he has been lobbying to get Ghislaine Maxwell a lesser sentence. So yeah, that's how he stands. There was another article about Les Wexner, who is the Victoria's Secret guy, but I'm not going to go into it today. But these are all the stories that he's connected with. Yeah, sorry, he was reportedly lobbying Trump to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell before her trial. So I was just going to say as well, like when I've talked about Virginia Giuffre's dad and him, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, there's another person that comes into this story as a public figure who is related to the Andrew story as well, and that is Lady Victoria Harvey. Yeah, so she's like she has never been anything special in this country. But she's kind of like a bit of a reality. I think she's been on a reality show or something. I don't even know how she got famous. But basically, there's something wrong with her face as well, because she can't talk. She can only talk on one side of her mouth. But she goes on the same programs and channels as Alan Dershowitz, and they stand there and say that these women that were victims of Jeffrey Epstein were not victims of sex trafficking. Like, I made a video about Virginia Giuffre after I heard she passed away, and I found a clip of her, and she was like, sitting on a yacht with a glass of champagne, that's not sex trafficking. And I'm like, I just don't know how she has the front to make that her public persona, but she has done this. She has said that Andrew is innocent, and she stands there and takes a stance against the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, along with Alan Dershowitz. So I just think it's really interesting that these people all go to the same channels, and it's just made me understand that, like, this is how this propaganda works in the media, whether it is on the normal TV or on YouTube or in TikTok content, because, you know, there are YouTubers that have TikTok channels and they do little clips on there of it, and it's feeding into people's brains. So that was all I really wanted to say. I just think that this stuff has been going on a very, very long time, and everyone's like, we need the Epstein files, we need the Epstein files. And like, I get what they're saying. I mean, the Epstein files would be good if we could actually see someone brought to justice from them. But I think there is so much information that has already been given to us on who was involved in this stuff and how it was covered up, that do we really need the Epstein files, or is it just a PR thing? That's what I kind of feel. I'm like, they're kind of saying like, well, we need the Epstein files to find out everything. And I'm like, yeah, but we haven't even dealt with what we already know, which is loads. And a lot of these people are dying as well. So, you know, when I'm laughing about the not nice people who are dying, obviously, because some of them are getting old. But yeah, I just think that what I'm trying to say is I feel like it's a bit of a cover up for, we already have a lot of information that could be lobbied, that could be the authorities could be pressured to do something about what we do know, but instead it's like dragging it on and on. So yeah, I just wanted to say that her mouth is bad because of the lies. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there might be another reason. I try to not be I'm not a troll. I try to not be nasty, but I think it might be down to a little nasty habit she might have. But anyway, that's just speculation. I want to say as well, hi to Austin, my fave. Last episode as well, and I thought I had this sorted out, but I just don't know why it will not move the comments. Oh, before I came on, I could scroll, and now, see, it won't scroll. But yeah, big news. On my last episode, I got a super chat. Honestly, it has made my day to get a super chat, because I've just wanted to know what it feels like, and it feels really good. So I want to say a big shout out to Austin for my super chat. And yeah, I mean, I think I could probably add more to just that little bit of background information that I've just sort of spoken on. But one thing I will say is, I know a couple of people know this, but like a long time ago, I used to work in the fashion industry, and I worked in in the beauty industry. So I had a job doing beauty treatments, but I worked in the fashion industry. So some of these people, as I mentioned, I actually knew personally, not Ghislaine Maxwell, not Jeffrey Epstein, but I know someone who associates with that lady Victoria Harvey. I didn't know that at the time. I found this out recently. And I also know that her ex-husband is, because I don't know if they have fallen out, but I know they've been business partners and friends for years. And I've thought to myself, should I make a video about this? Because it's so like deep that I maybe need to wait for like the right time so that I can make a good video about it. But yeah, I mean, the other person I wanted to quickly mention was Andrew's ex-missus, Fergie. I've not met her, but I've met her daughters. But I knew someone that was very close to her, yeah. And I can tell you, that woman has always been broke. She's always been broke and desperate for money. So to find out she was begging Epstein for money, like I was not surprised. But again, it's just another example of these certain type of women that will look down their nose at people, yeah, and make women like embarrassed of themselves and feel ashamed. Meanwhile, they're doing the same damn thing, pretending not to be. So yeah, I think that we should say it. We should call them out. I'm here for the sisterhood. I'm here for the sisterhood. I'm here for the not blaming victims hood. Do you know what I mean? And now I'm going to carry on with the book, so I might come back to some comments in a bit. Even as a toddler, so we're on chapter 24. Oh yeah, one more thing that we found out on the last episode, which ties into everything I've been saying. The FBI contacted her, yeah, about Jeffrey Epstein. They said, we know you're one of his victims. She had to do a police interview. She gave them the original copy of Andrew, and she never got it back. How sus is that? How sus is that? And thankfully, the male journalist took a photo of it, because she was then given a CD-ROM with the photo on it, but you can imagine that would have been used against her. Like, well, you don't have the original. How can you have a CD-ROM of a photo taken in, when was it, 1999, I think? 1999, 2000, around then. People weren't really using CD-ROMs then. So yeah, I just thought that was another little tidbit that she gave us that, you know, is extremely sus when these authorities are supposed to be, they're supposed to be catching criminals, not making it easier for them to get away with their crimes. And I know there are some decent ones out there, but yeah, trust, they were all working together on that one. Okay, let's get to chapter 24, A Small Dent. Even as a toddler, Ellie was a character. Mischievous, hilarious, stubborn, and strong as an ox. At 18 months old, she'd wandered off while we were exploring an animal sanctuary called Walkabout Park in New South Wales. I looked everywhere for her and was becoming hysterical when I finally found her, fearlessly chasing kangaroos. I called her my own miniature Tarzan. I was inspired by my daughter more and more. I wanted to set a courageous example for her and for my boys too. Through Churcher, that's Sharon Churcher, the journalist, I'd heard that Brad Edwards, the Florida lawyer who'd helped Churcher find me, had filed a lawsuit challenging the legality of the federal government's non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. Edwards believed that the agreement, which promised that Epstein and his co-conspirators, a couple of whom I've just mentioned, would not be federally prosecuted if he pleaded guilty to state charges, had violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act of 2004. The CVRA asserts that crime victims have the right to meaningfully confer with prosecutors in cases brought against those who victimized them. Epstein's victims had not only not conferred with prosecutors, we'd been kept in the dark completely. That's right. There was actually a police officer that tried to get him prosecuted. So when we talk about the police are corrupt, there are actually some police that are not corrupt. It's just like few and far between. But yeah, he was actually trying to get this case done the right way, and he was overruled. Churcher said Edwards had filed his 2008 suit against the U.S. Attorney's Office on behalf of two unnamed women. If I wanted to join as Jane Doe 3, she said, Edwards would probably be interested, so I called him. Edwards was thrilled to hear from me. In his book, Relentless Pursuit, he describes how he felt. Finally, someone from Epstein's inner circle wanted to talk and wanted to help. In our first conversation, he explained to me that the CVRA suit was seeking to invalidate Epstein's non-prosecution agreement so that one of the most dangerous child molesters in human history, let's just read that again. The CVRA suit was seeking to invalidate Epstein's non-prosecution agreement so that one of the most dangerous child molesters in human history could finally be charged and tried for all his crimes. This is in 2008. When did he get locked up? Was it 2020 or 2020? I've forgotten. It was a long time after 2008 anyway. All along, I'd known that I was just one of many victims hurt by Epstein and Maxwell. There's a footnote. Where's it for? Have I got to it yet? All along, I'd known that I was just one of many victims hurt by Epstein and Maxwell. But in the 9 years since I'd escaped their grip, this idea had remained abstract. Thousands of these girls and women probably existed, but I didn't think I'd ever know their names, let alone meet them. Now, Edwards said he was working closely with some of those women, and he offered me the opportunity to join them. Churcher had told me that Epstein had already made 16 out-of-court settlements with other victims, much like the one I'd agreed to. More were likely in the works. As I talked with Edwards, I wondered if at least some of us could band together. On April 7th, 2011, I had a phone call with Edwards and another lawyer, Jack Scarola, who said he was representing Edwards in another suit. Okay, there's a footnote. Epstein had filed a bogus lawsuit against Brad Edwards, alleging that he and one of his victim clients, as well as a law partner, had formed a criminal enterprise and conspiracy to defraud Epstein. That suit, not Edwards's countersuit alleging malicious prosecution, would later be settled out of court in 2018. Don't know what that's about. The three of us introduced ourselves, and Scarola asked me to describe the basic chronology of my time with Epstein. He asked about my level of sexual experience when I first met him and about how I was recruited. He asked me what I was paid by Epstein and about how soon Epstein had begun trafficking me to his friends. I answered to the best of my ability. Are you able to name some of these people for me? Scarola asked. I demurred. No, not at this stage. Some of these people are really influential. I don't want to start another shitstorm with a few of them. I don't know if I want to. I'm really scared of where this is going to go. See, now you can understand why she would say that. Scarola said he understood. Why are you providing this cooperation? He asked. I'm out to help the bigger picture, I answered. I think that this has gone on long enough. Referring to Epstein, I said, it's a big slap in my face that he can get away with hurting me so bad, let alone so many other girls, and laugh about it. At the end of the call, Scarola said, okay, Virginia, is there anything else that you would like to add? There was. As the mother of 3 children, I felt it was my duty to stand up to predators like Epstein and Maxwell, I said. I mentioned Ellie in particular. I would put my neck on the line to make sure she never has to go through what I had to go through, I said. Joining Edward's CVRA case, I said, was what I would want somebody to do for my daughter or my sister or my friend. In the end, I said, I was just trying to do the right thing. That's what I feel like I'm doing, I said. I'm making a small dent in this big world we live in. I had resolved yet again to find a new therapist. In September 2011, I met with a psychologist in her 70s named Judith Lightfoot. I liked her immediately. Her intake notes, which have been made part of my court file, so I now have a copy, provide a snapshot of what we covered in that first session. Lightfoot asked me about my relationship with my mother. Based on my answers, she circled both distant and non-existent on a pre-printed form. She asked the same question about my connection to my dad, non-existent, and my brothers, Danny, distant, Skydie, very close. According to Lightfoot's notes of what I told her, I'd been entrapped from age 13 to age 19, and I suffered from flashbacks and anxiety. When I said that I'd been R-worded by an older man and that I'd been trafficked, I could tell Lightfoot had never heard of Epstein. She spelled his first name Jeff, Geoff, but she didn't need to know who he was to understand how much he'd hurt me. I told her about our first encounter and how he and Maxwell had made me undress and perform sexual acts. I also told her how they trained me how to please a man. At one point, Lightfoot asked me how I define my purpose or the meaning of my life. My answer: to be the best, to do no harm. By the end of the session, she had concluded that I was suffering from PTSD, but she told me she believed she could help me reframe some of my thinking about past traumas. At the end of the intake form, she wrote, "Remarkable young woman, supportive therapy needed." I felt fortunate to have found a therapist I trusted, and increasingly I was feeling optimistic about life. Partly that was because I'd discovered something that was really helping Tyler. Floor time therapy. I loved the teacher. She put effort into really seeing Tyler, not just scrutinizing me as a mother, which I appreciated. Sometimes our sessions were an hour, other times we were there all day, whatever it took to get Tyler talking. He's a person, this teacher kept saying of my son. He deserves to be respected. Previously, I'd been guessing at what he wanted and then handing it to him if he nodded or smiled. Now I abandoned that approach and instead got down on the floor to play with Tyler at his level. If Tyler wanted a toy I had in my hand, my job was to get him to express his desire verbally, to help him see the link between talking and getting what you want. You just need to find your words, the teacher told Tyler. She was kind but not coddling. She treated him as if he was capable. When I first insisted that Tyler say the word for a piece of Lego or a ring of keys before I gave it to him, there were tears of frustration. Mostly his, but sometimes mine too. But little by little, over many months, Tyler transformed from a frustrated, non-verbal child to a thriving chatterbox. We got Tyler weaned from his pacifiers and his tantrums subsided. He still lived in his head some of the time, but now he was becoming precociously articulate. I just want to say, like, if you've ever watched old footage of, I mean, look, she hasn't said that he's autistic, but this sounds to me like a child that has autism. If you've ever watched old footage of how they treated children with autism, I mean, probably as recently as the 70s or 80s, I guess this is the 2000s. It's actually heartbreaking. It's actually heartbreaking. They used to lock those kids up. They used to put them in institutions. And that's why if you ever see that footage of kids in institutions and they're like rocking like that and like banging their head and making noises and stuff, because they were just crying out for like some patience to like release their ability to communicate again. And it's just like, it's the same with people that have dementia as well. Human nature, when it's put to good use, like patience, one-on-one time with people, releases so much healing out of a person. But yet that's the one thing we don't do. So I'm just enjoying this story so much. It's got so much to think about. I really wasn't expecting to get all of this from her book. No, I didn't really know what to expect, but it's really, I'm really, really enjoying it. I don't want it to end. Okay. For so long, I thought I'd lost my second son. Now, Tyler had been found. He started preschool at a sweet little place called Noah's Ark Learning Center, and he began to make friends. In April 2012, when he turned 5, we threw a party for 25 kids at our house. So many that I thought I needed 2 clowns, not 1, to entertain them all. Alex hated clowns, so he spent the day inside moping, but Tyler was thrilled, especially when he saw the cake. He'd asked for a hammerhead shark cake, which was so specific that I'd had to download a photo to take to the bakery just so they could get it right. The joy of bonding with my sons made me miss my brothers. I thought again about returning to the United States. I truly believed that I'd written on the final page of Tyler's baby book, family is what matters most, but how could I make my family a priority when they were so far away? In addition, I wanted to be more available to help Brad Edwards. The lawyer and I had kept in touch, and I saw him as a hero. Working initially with a survivor of Epstein's abuse named Courtney Wild, Edwards had been among the first lawyers to begin piecing together how Epstein and Maxwell had enticed girls to recruit other girls. Wild had been 14 years old in 2002 when she was first molested by Epstein at his Palm Beach mansion. 6 years later, she'd walked into Edwards' office, and they'd been a team ever since. Edwards seemed tireless and meticulous. Had I lived in the United States, I would already have joined forces with him. Now that felt like the next move I wanted to make. Wow. Moving a whole country to try and get justice against this guy. Robbie and I talked about it. We knew we could get visas this time as we have more money in the bank. Robbie was torn. He loved our life in Australia, but he also wanted me to be happy. My brother Danny assured him he'd have no trouble finding work in the States. Finally, Robbie said yes. So at the end of summer in 2013, we sold our house and began the process of packing our things and saying our goodbyes. We weren't leaving for good, we told our friends and Robbie's family. But America beckoned and I had work to do. Let me check the chat. My background in fashion. Yeah. Oh, I was thinking like one day I might do a more like personal life. Because I'll be honest with you, I've been getting a lot of comments lately, like lovely comments. But people have been asking me, can you look into this? Can you look into that? And I'm like, for me to like make a video and feel inspired to talk about something, I feel like I have to have a personal connection to it. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise I'm like, I'm just repeating what's already been said. So yeah, I'd prefer to talk about situations that I've had personal experience of that relate to a public figure. Do you know what I mean? But I have a lot of stories, trust me. I have a lot of stories, I saw all sorts. Naomi Campbell. Ooh, I can tell you about that girl. Okay, let's carry on. 25, back in the Sunshine State. On our 11th wedding anniversary in October 2013, Robbie and I moved our 3 kids and 2 dogs, Champ and Bear, a 100-pound Alaskan Malamute we'd gotten just after Ellie's birth, from Australia to Titusville, a city of about 40,000 people in East Central Florida. Titusville is probably best known for its proximity to the Kennedy Space Center, and it's less than an hour from Orlando. At first, we stayed with my brother Danny, his wife Lynette, and their daughter Sarah. Then we bought our own house on half an acre nearby. Our new house had 2 stories with a screened-in porch and a 2-car garage. But my favourite part was the backyard, dominated by a gargantum oak tree draped in Spanish moss. It backed up to a canal. Every day, I'd take the kids down to watch the turtles and feed the ducks. Robbie and I made friends with our neighbours, a retired minister and her husband, and our location was ideal. I was a 3-hour drive from Brad Edwards' Fort Lauderdale office and just 10 minutes from Danny. Soon my little brother Skydie and his girlfriend moved in with us for a while, which I was thrilled about. It was amazing how quickly we fell back into our old teasing routines. I'd call him Stupid Head and he'd call me Sissy. It felt good to have my family around me again. We enrolled the kids in school, and for a moment it seemed they couldn't have been happier. I began looking for work as a bartender and briefly took a job at a closed-down restaurant that someone was trying to reopen. That's about the time we discovered that the local schools were terribly overcrowded. Our kids kept coming home and talking about how they weren't allowed to ask questions in class. The teachers were struggling just to maintain control. I took a leap of faith. We'd try homeschooling. I threw myself into keeping the kids engaged. We'd go to the beach or explore the local tidal pools. We were regulars at the nearby manatee observation deck, where we watched those mammals eat seagrass. Some days I'd play classical music in the kitchen until the kids finished their lessons. Other days would be all Eminem, all the time. Yeah, I brought my daughter up on rap music. I did. I literally did. Alex in particular loved Eminem. Even at 7 years old, he'd run round the living room rapping. I'm not afraid, he'd squeal, and I'd echo him, just as in the song, to take a stand. He'd call out, and I'd repeat it. Moving back to the Sunshine State also put me nearer to my dad, who had come back to Florida from California. What a surprise. He now lived in a triple-wide mobile home in Summerfield, about 100 miles to the east. I tried to see this as an opportunity. For all Dad's faults, I wanted my kids to know their grandpa. Oh, Robbie was down on the idea, but I promised him I could manage my father. He has good qualities, I said. My husband was skeptical, but he went along with my plan at first. For a while, I thought I was making it work, taking the kids to visit Dad and letting them see the playful, fun side of him. Alex loved being a passenger when my dad fired up his riding lawnmower and took it for a spin around his yard. Tyler was transfixed by Dad's Pee Wee 500 mini motorcycle. When we bought Ellie her first horse, a cantankerous animal we called Angel, although she was anything but, we kept her in Dad's barn. I was flooded with memories of how Dad and I had bonded over horses, and I wanted Ellie to love horses too. When we got a second horse, Copper, he also stayed at Dad's. At this point, I asked Brad Edwards to be my lawyer, and as I got to know him, I began to feel as if he were my third brother. Brad had been locking horns with Epstein for years, and man, did he have stories to tell. Tell us then. Once in a court-ordered mediation session, Epstein had tried to be buddy-buddy with him, suggesting conspiratorially, we should just start breaking the shit out of all these glasses. he waved at several drinking glasses laid out on a table, and make everyone think we're killing each other. Brad believed there was a part of Epstein that enjoyed the cat and mouse game of being investigated. He wanted the world to know what he'd done, but only if he still got away with it. He is a freak. Whenever anyone zeroed in on his culpability, however, Epstein would turn snide. Brad told me that when he deposed Epstein in 2010, he'd specifically asked him if he knew a woman named Virginia Roberts. Epstein's response was to ask condescendingly if Brad would spell my name. Facing more questions about me, Epstein at one point invoked the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution, which guarantees that an individual cannot be forced to provide information that might incriminate him or her. But when Brad asked Epstein, "Is it true you asked Virginia Roberts to have sex with numerous friends of yours?" Epstein couldn't resist a smug response. "Are you kidding?" he asked, his voice full of disdain. Much of my early work with Brad and his associate, Brittany Henderson, was a bit like piecing together a puzzle. Like Sharon Churcher and the FBI before them, they assembled an even larger rogues gallery of faces to help me identify the men I'd been trafficked to. Again, I didn't recognize many of the men, but others, it was as if I'd preserved their faces in an airtight vault in my head, one that had been waiting to be unlocked. The former governor of a Western state, a respected US senator, and so many scientists. Oh yeah, that was what I was going to say. Going back to Dershowitz. He was a professor. I forgot. That was the most important bit. She said there was a professor. He was a professor. And he's a professor at Harvard. Harvard. Can you believe it? To this day, I think he still has that role. This is what they're teaching them kids. Where was I? As I've said, usually when I was trafficked to these men, Epstein didn't introduce us or tell me their names or their titles. Some critics have insinuated that there's no way I could remember these men given the Xanax and the alcohol that I sometimes relied upon to survive in those years. But to them, I say simply this: when a man has been on top of you, his face just inches from your own, you remember him. You may not remember the exact day, date, or time that the man abused you, but his face stays in your mind even when you wish it wouldn't. To be fair, I can imagine, because they weren't very attractive, some of these men. For example, I told Brad and Brittany that I recognized Marvin Minsky, the prominent MIT cognitive and computer scientist. It hadn't been hard for my lawyers to find Minsky's connections to Epstein. In mid-April 2002, 5 months before I escaped Epstein's clutches, the two men had hosted a gathering of 20 scholars in the field of artificial intelligence on Little St. James. The goal of the 3-day conference, called the St. Thomas Common Sense Symposium, Designing Architectures for Human Level Intelligence, Jesus, was to contemplate building a computer resourceful enough to have what the group called common sense. Oh my God. Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because that was all a dream. What do they call it? A pipe dream. They really thought they was going to make a computer that had common sense. A computer could never have common sense, guys. You're bad. You're bad. All those people who invested in it, you're bad. Minsky had published a paper about it. I bet he had. I wonder who paid for it. This could have been when I was trafficked to him for the first time. I'm not sure of the date. What I do know is that Minsky was in his 70s then, precisely 56 years older than me. We shared a birthday, and I remember what happened. Epstein sent me to a cabana on the beach and told me to service the man inside. Oh my gosh. How old was he? He was in his 70s. I will never forget Minsky's bald head and the way his face seemed to have shriveled like one of those folk art dolls whose heads are dried up apples. Throughout my time having with him, I could hear the waves lapping outside the little room. I tried to focus only on that sound. Another prominent man I recognized from his photo was a heralded statesman. He was the oldest person Epstein ever trafficked me to, and I have memories of servicing him in both New York and Palm Beach. I remember this man didn't talk to me much. He also had trouble getting a full hard on. So we did not have intercourse. I performed oral on him instead. I had no inkling of this man's stature. I assumed he was just another scientist, but I knew the man was important to Epstein because Epstein made a memorable fuss about how gently I was to attend to him. What was his name? Oh, she doesn't say his name. He was the oldest person, so he must have been 80. Oh my God. When I was with this man, I never succeeded in getting him to come. He's 80 years old, but he enjoyed being touched. Afterward, I massaged his chest, working my way up to his head and gave him a scalp massage. He might have even been older than that. For months now, I'd been continuing my sessions with Judith Lightfoot over the phone, and the psychologist had encouraged me to start journaling again. When I told her I was still having recurring nightmares, in one, Epstein sat in a chair watching me as I endured something painful. She had an idea. I was to transcribe my worst dreams, ideally right after I woke up from them. Then, when I'd filled up the green spiral notebook she knew I was already scribbling in, I should burn it. Lightfoot believed that recording my worst memories and then destroying what I'd written might help keep my predators' faces from breaking through my subconscious mind each night. Robbie agreed. He'd always believed in the power of ritual. That's interesting. That is interesting because to me, rituals have always been given a very negative stigma. Like they were satanic. Soon my notebook was full and Robbie was building me a bonfire in our backyard. Honey, let's put an end to all that evil, he said, on the evening we'd chosen to light my worst torments on fire. The kids were in bed and it was dark in the yard. The orange light of the blaze reflected off both our faces. I was ready. Holding the notebook in my left hand, I used my right to rip out each page. First, I read what I'd written out loud. Then I threw that page into the flames. 85 pages later, I was done. These men are only in my nightmares, I said over and over. They no longer own me. I could only hope that was true. In July 2014, Brad and I prepared to fly to New York to meet the famed litigator David Boies. Boies' firm, Boies, Schiller, Flexner, was considering joining forces with Brad on his CVRA lawsuit. But before it did so, Boies wanted a face-to-face meeting. Robbie and the kids stayed in Florida. I booked them into a fancy resort in Fort Lauderdale so they could relax while Mom did her job, fighting bad guys. More and more, I was talking to Alex, Tyler, and Ellie about the wrongs I was trying to right. The details, of course, were too much to share, but I wanted them to know that I believed it was important to stand up to bullies, but that at times that would mean I would have to be away from them. When Brad and I arrived in Manhattan, we were 4 hours early for our meeting. So we had lunch and wandered around the Upper East Side. You know, we're pretty close to Epstein's mansion, Brad said at one point. Do you think there's anyone still working there who might talk to you? I said the only person might be Epstein's New York butler, Jojo Fontanilla. I remembered him fondly. He'd helped me get me to the hospital that time in 2001, just before I turned 18, where I felt as if I were being torn in half. Brad held up a tape recorder with a remote microphone that he'd brought. If we pin this mic to my blouse, he suggested, maybe I could gather a little intel. You could just knock and see if Jojo is there, Brad said. Want to give it a try? I nodded obediently. I so wanted to play a meaningful role in Brad's campaign to make Epstein pay. But as we got closer, I started to feel sick. It was a beautiful, mild day, but my palms were sweating. Standing on the corner of 71st Street and 5th Avenue, I gathered myself, breathing deeply in and out. I can do this, I told Brad. I'd do anything to push this case forward. But while bringing paedophiles to justice was an honourable goal, I hadn't fully realised how hard it would be to return to the epicenters of my trauma. I had been acting tough for Brad because I wanted him to believe I was worth including in his campaign, but I could feel my panic rising, and I realised I can't keep pretending. I can lock these feelings away. Burning my nightmare journals was a good start, but I clearly needed to find more ways to process my worst fears. As we neared the front door, Brad said it was probably best if he waited across the street. He gave me the recording device, and I turned into the entryway where Epstein's brass initials, J.E., were affixed to the wall, and headed up the steps toward his massive front door. Robbie says sometimes my balls are bigger than my brain, and this was an instance that proves yet again that he is right. What I was doing returning to this place, where treated like a piece of meat, I had suffered so much. I wanted to be brave, to have my mere presence assert, I'm no longer your victim, you didn't break me. But now I was nauseous. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. What if they let you in? What if someone inside somehow hurt me again? I rang the bell, and after a moment, a blonde, curly-haired girl who looked 19 or so answered. I looked for Jojo and gave my name. He was my driver for a while, I said. I just wanted to catch up and see how he's doing. The girl closed the door and returned a moment later. Jojo wasn't there, she said. I'll never know whether that was true or whether he was just afraid, as I was. Epstein's employers were all required to sign non-disclosure agreements, and they all knew, as I had known, that there were consequences to disobeying the boss. Yeah, he didn't have a legal team. Oh, I can see the chat. He didn't have a legal team on his side. And this is just a guess. What was his name? I think it didn't she say he was Filipino? While I was relieved to walk back out to the street, at the same time it stung to get the brush off. I thought that Jojo's heart might be big enough to at least say hello. When I returned, I'm sure they must have had like a phone entry system so they could see who was coming to the door. Just a thought. When I rejoined Brad where he was waiting, he could see I was upset, but the look on his face said he was proud of me. You were willing to go into the lion's den, Virginia, he said. Looking back, I'm not sure this exercise was worth the trauma it caused me. I feel the same, actually. But I was determined to be helpful, even to my own detriment. It was time to go see Boys in his 7th floor office on Lexington Avenue, near 51st Street. We checked in with the receptionist, and a few minutes later, Boys himself walked through the glass doors behind us. After we all said hello, Boys led Brad and me and another lawyer named Stan Pottinger into a large conference room. I'd heard Boys was a big deal. He'd taken on Microsoft in a landmark antitrust case, represented Al Gore in the wake of the 2000 presidential election, and stood up for the National Basketball Players Association during the 2011 NBA lockout. I don't know what that is, among a zillion other high-profile cases. But for whatever reason, I wasn't nervous in his presence. As he took his seat at the head of the table, I started in, thanking him for considering helping us. As for my own motivations, I told him, I've stayed silent for too long, but not anymore. I'm here to help stop Epstein once and for all. Boys asked me several questions in his methodical way, and I told him my story. I said my goal was to undo Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, and Brad chimed in about how he planned to make that happen. When we were done with our spiel, Boys said, it appears obvious Brad has everything well under control. Where do you see me fitting in? It was Brad's turn to talk. Epstein should be in jail, he remembers saying. My goal is to put him there. He will do anything to stop me. He has a powerful team behind him and unlimited resources to go after me. And Virginia and anyone who stands up to him. We're going to need a heavyweight legal team to counter their attacks. We needed Boy's reputation, his clout, and his firm's resources and expertise. There will be plenty of room for you. There will be plenty of room for you, Brad promised. Boys didn't hesitate. Okay, he said, then I'm in. I didn't know it at the time, but this was a transformative moment, not just for Brad, but for me. I mean, I'm just going to say as well, like, having seen the outcome of the P. Diddy trial, where that was prosecuted by the state, and the O.J. Simpson trial that was also prosecuted by the state, and seeing how what a bad job they did of getting justice for just regular people, It's just wild that you have to go to this effort, or this length, sorry, to get like teams of lawyers to fight for, as they called him, the worst child abuser on earth or something. I don't know if it was on earth, but in history. I mean, yeah, you should be able to get justice through the justice system. Do you know what I mean? Later that night, Brad and I flew back to Fort Lauderdale and I rejoined Robbie and the kids. It had been a successful trip, but I was bone tired. Over the next several days, Robbie would tell me I seemed to have regressed, as if by briefly re-entering Epstein and Maxwell's world, I'd reverted to the mindset I'd had when I was their captive. I mean, I can imagine it was extremely stressful going back to that location. Back home in Titusville, I slept a lot, and Robbie said I didn't seem able to communicate with him or the kids. I apologized, but in truth, I wasn't aware of how I was acting. I wanted to be strong, to be a fighter, but part of me was leveled by the effort that required. I guess it made sense. I'd been diagnosed with PTSD, and indeed, I felt shell shocked, like a soldier who goes back into battle before fully recovering from an earlier ambush. Other parts of my life, too, were sapping my energy. My attempt to make peace with my dad, for example. I'll never forget the day Robbie, me, the kids, and my dad went to the Busch Gardens amusement park in Tampa. Usually, Robbie wouldn't allow me to be alone with my dad. It was an agreement we'd made that we both felt was for the best. But Robbie hates roller coasters, and Dad and I love them. So on this day, the two of us headed off to get in line for the biggest one, which famously went through a lion's pen before it did 12 upside down circulars in the air. Oh my God, 12. I'm not a fan of upside down roller coasters. It was starting to rain and the line was moving slowly when suddenly Dad turned to me and put a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry for what I did to you, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. I'm sorry for what I let Forrest do to you. It was wrong. You were just a kid. You're my baby girl. I always want you in my life. I'm so sad that I put you through everything that you went through. I remember we were half standing under an awning then, and it was raining harder. So when I started crying, I wasn't sure if Dad could see it. In the days that followed, I felt almost high. Dad had acknowledged what he'd never been willing to before. It didn't make up for the damage he and Forrest had done to me, but it was still validating. I wanted that to mean a door to reconciliation had opened for the two of us. But then I began to think seriously about my father. He now had several grandchildren, 3 of them little girls, my Ellie, then Sarah, the daughter of my older brother, and my younger brother's newborn daughter. Even as I had allowed my kids to spend time with Dad, I'd watched over them like a hawk and never left them alone with him, especially Ellie. And that speaks volumes. I wouldn't take the risk that Dad might hurt her in the way he'd hurt me. Now, all at once, I realised my brothers didn't know how to take those precautions because I'd never told them what Dad had done to me. I needed to break my silence about Dad. We need to have a sit down, I told my brothers. I think I met with them separately. That's what they remember too. I told them what Dad had done to me when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 years old. Neither one of my brothers wanted to believe me at first, but they could see in my eyes that I couldn't be making it up. By the end of the night, all of us were in tears. My revelations caused things to change. First, my older brother confronted Dad. "You've got some pretty heavy charges on you in this family," Danny said. My dad just looked at him with a mousy expression that Danny would later describe as really weird, embarrassed, but perverted. Dad neither confirmed nor denied what he'd done to Danny or to Skydie, who raised the topic soon afterwards. When our dad disappeared with Skydie's daughter while at a Tampa Buccaneers game, Skydie was furious. "Don't ever walk away with my kids again," he told Dad, adding, "And you know why, right?" Dad's response, a blank stare. Danny told me later that he felt he'd seen a monster inside Dad for the first time. That's the word he used, monster. After Danny told our dad he would never see his granddaughter Sarah again, Dad showed up at the workplace of Danny's wife, Lynette, and cornered her, blocking her exit. He told her he knew where Sarah went to school. "You can't take her away from me," he threatened. My older brother was so worried that Dad might try to snatch Sarah that he called his daughter's school and told them that Dad should never be allowed to pick her up ever again. And that was the end of Dad and Danny's relationship. To this day, they do not speak. Of course, Dad was mad at me too. Why was it taking me so long? You are probably wondering, to expel him from my life once... Oh, sorry. Why was it taking me so long, you are probably wondering, to expel him from my life once and for all? That was definitely what Robbie wanted, but I was having trouble setting a firm boundary. I'd warned my brothers, telling them what Dad was capable of. Wasn't that enough? Then came a telephone call so disturbing that I will never get over it. I remember I was standing on our back porch in Titusville, looking out at the Spanish moss hanging off our big old tree when the phone rang. When I stepped outside to answer, the caller, who I knew and trusted, told me they had heard that evidence existed indicating that Epstein had paid my father a sum of money way back in 2000 when I was first being trained by Epstein and Maxwell on El Brillo Way. What did I say? As that was sinking in, had Dad profited from my pain? The caller asked if I remembered my father getting a financial windfall around that time, but my mind was blank. I did not want to believe this. After I hung up, I went to tell Robbie what I'd heard. The thought of a father knowingly accepting hush money from the middle-aged predator who was abusing his teenage daughter was horrifying. I felt like I'd gone into shock. But for my husband, this moment was the last straw. If he saw my dad on our property again, he said, he wasn't sure he could restrain himself. "I want to unalive that man," he said. While I'd fantasized for years about a happy family reunion in Florida, the state was proving too small for the Roberts Guiffre clan. I'd always told Robbie I wanted him to understand where I came from. Well, now he did. In ways we'd never anticipated, it was time to leave. When Robbie and I put our minds to something, we get it done. I called a moving company. We rented a minivan and packed our bags. I remember the furniture was already on a truck heading to Colorado when I called my father and confronted him. Dad, I know Epstein paid you off, I said. There was a brief silence, and then he started yelling at me about being an ungrateful daughter. Here's the thing, Dad, I said. If one of my kids, God forbid, ever accused me of something as disgusting as this, I would tell them the truth. If I hadn't done it, I'd say I hadn't done it. But I'm not hearing you say that. You're not saying a thing. I don't know if he hung up or I did. I was seething. How many times could this one person fail me? A little more than an hour later, Robbie headed to the backyard to mow our lawn one last time. We were putting our Titusville house on the market, and he wanted it to show well. That meant I was standing inside our empty house alone, looking out at the street, when I saw Dad pull up and get out of his sports car. I opened the front door, and I could see from the way he was swaggering toward me that he was ready to fight. But I put my hand on his chest and told him he wasn't coming in. Dad, I need you to stop, I said. Think for a second. Do you want your grandchildren to see you and Robbie down on the floor trying to kill each other with blood everywhere? Because that's what is about to happen. If you don't turn around right now, I'm calling the police. I must have scared him because he stopped pushing me. I could see Dad looking over my shoulder, registering the lack of furniture in the living room. What's going on? He asked. We're moving, I said. You're never going to see us again. This is the last time. The look on his face then, I would like to erase it from my memory, but I can't. It was like his features were collapsing inward, like he was being flattened by an invisible force. Can I see my grandchildren? He stammered. No, I said, you can't. That's when he started sobbing. My dad has always been good at making me feel bad for him. You're my baby girl, he wailed. You'll always be my only baby girl. That's Dad. Even in the worst situation, he can manipulate things to seem as if they should go in his favour. If you leave, I'm going to have no one to look after me, he said. Who's going to take care of me? Dad, I said. Now I was crying too. Robbie doesn't know you're here. You need to get in your car and you need to go before he finishes cutting the grass. Because if he comes in and finds you here, I won't be able to hold him back. Dad's eyes darted around as if he was listening for the sound of the lawnmower. Then he turned, walked to his car and drove off, and that was the last time I ever saw my father. A few minutes later, Robbie put the lawnmower in the garage. We were leaving it for the realtor in case the house took a while to sell. And within an hour, our family was crowded into the minivan and we were heading west. Our destination, Penrose, Colorado, just south of Colorado Springs. My dad had broken my heart. I was done with him. Now I would try reuniting with Mom. Oh my gosh, strap in. I just wanted to say as well, like, another little random thought, because I've tried to like understand why she couldn't break away from her dad, and then I'm like, yeah, she really was like raised on Disney, and she was, you know, she said earlier in the book about how much Disney films influenced her life, and I'm like, yeah, Disney had a way of making kids that were being mistreated kind of bond with their abusers. Do you know what I mean? When you actually go back and look at those films, it's really interesting. Anyway, the other random thought I had was going back to the AI thing. I forgot this, yeah. There's another author journalist. She's a journalist writer. I have her book. I have one. She's written 2 books about Jeffrey Epstein. Whitney Webb. She has put every single fact on the background of his story together. And I remember her saying that Epstein, because, you know, this is how he went about things. He went to these colleges, yeah, and then he like sponsored scientific research for these things like AI, for machine learning, which we now know is a myth. And I actually made a video ages ago about this British professor of computer science that was literally talking absolute garbage. Like, he was literally making it up on a really mainstream news channel. And it just frustrated me so much that the guy interviewing him, who used to be like a political pundit, he didn't know. He didn't know that he was telling him garbage. Like, they have been trying to scaremonger this story that like AI can take over and it's going to overpower humans. They're still honestly going along with it. It's so silly. But yeah, what I was going to say about Whitney Webb is she was saying that one of the ways that they initiated early AI technology was Epstein sponsored education in like Africa, places in Africa, and they used the kids there like as a trade-off. They used the kids, they did mind experiments on the kids to like feed the machines on how humans respond. But yeah, makes a lot more sense now knowing that these investors were investing in AI, and the scientists that he knew were professors of it. Anyway, I'm feeling a little bit like I need to have a pause for tonight. But I'm just looking at the chat. Someone mentioned Klaus von Bülow, yeah. Oh my God, have I heard of Peter Nygard? I wanted to do like I really am one day going to get a laptop, yeah, so I can do like presentations, like live presentations. So that Peter Nygard, before the Diddy trial, there's this woman, yeah, she's quite a sort of she's a bit of a right winger. She's on that News Nation. Have you heard of News Nation? She has her own channel from News Nation, and growing up, she knew Peter Nygard, and she did a whole series on him. And I just found it really interesting. I mean, she couldn't not call him what he was, but there were times like she interviewed her mum who knew him, and they were part of a community where they lived because it was in Canada. And they were coming up these stories of like, well, they lived in this house and they had no heating, and, you know, blamed it on his upbringing, like on his upbringing and coming from a poverty background. And I'm like, a child doesn't suffer because of living in that environment. Like, this is another thing that I find so annoying about narratives. It's like a child's just happy if they're in a happy environment. They don't care if they're hot or cold. Like, you don't remember things like that as a child. You're just like your memories are very emotional as a child. Do you know what I mean? That's all I'm trying to say. But yeah, so I wanted to do like a reaction to one of the episodes, because she actually did an interview with someone who worked for him. That was her best friend. And she was saying stuff like, you know, the lack of boundaries in the workplace and he would walk around naked, go to the toilet while on the phone to them. These kind of like removal of boundaries in the workplace. And it just corresponded exactly with what I was hearing about P. Diddy. And I'm like, it's just so odd that one of them gets locked away for life and one of them hasn't, whereas there's really not a lot of difference in their behavior. But yeah, the Peter Nygaard case is horrific, but all of these people act in a very, very similar way. They have a business which people think they're, people are charmed, they're blindsided, they're like, oh my god, yeah, he's got a fashion brand. They're not expecting this person to be the monster that they actually are, because it's all glitz and champagne and parties and private jets, and you get caught up in it. So yeah, I thought that was I really wanted to do it ages ago, and then I was trying, this is before I could even do live streaming, and I was trying to figure out like if I could use Discord to do live streaming, but I haven't been able to figure out any other. There's no app you can use where you can do in-screen streaming, I think, without a desktop device. So one day we might go there, because it's still completely relevant. It's just what I find so interesting is their kind of explanation. It's almost like diminishing some of the accountability towards the guy, because I'm not being funny, yeah, but I feel like these people have, they've dehumanized themselves. They don't treat other humans as humans, so why do we have to like still have that empathy for them and say things like, oh, he lived in this house, like, so you're saying every single person that lives in a house as a like shares a two-room house as a family, that gives them an excuse to end up like that? No, it's just insane. And if he didn't have the money, that guy would have been locked up years ago for what he was getting up to. Anyway, I haven't heard of Lauren Numa, but it's been fun. I will be back soon, but I'm going to call it a night for tonight. Thank you all for watching, and look forward to the next one. Good night.